Well, today I saw the Fantastic Four movie, and despite the fact that it's been dumped on by practically everyone with working sight and hearing, I have to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the general consensus that the movie was a steamy pile of shit left in the car during a hot summer day. The problems it has are numerous, but anyone who's seen the movie and really tried to see it succeed will say the same thing. The movie started off pretty okay, got really good, then it just totally turned into a pile of shit during the last hour. Now, I'm sure there'll be plenty of videos stating why it sucked, and all of them will talk about the crappy story, bad CGI, etc., etc. But I want to take the conversation on a different path. I want to ask a deeper question. What exactly does this movie mean for comic book movies? Well, many of you will say not much because you're not Fantastic Four fans and whatnot, but I will beg to differ. And the reason why is because the Fantastic Four are a different comic book movie. They're not really like the Justice League, the Avengers, or the X-Men. If you think about it, the Fantastic Four, even in the world of Marvel, have always been that weird team in the Marvel lineup that kind of sticks out as being drastically different from their other titles. But how so? While the Avengers, X-Men, and other titles tend to be more action-oriented, the Fantastic Four are not. I relate to a quote from Tony Stark himself where he stated that the Avengers avenge, X-Men defend, and the Fantastic Four explore. Understanding that quote, you see that two of the teams are notorious for the fact that their entire point of existence is to be in constant battle. The Avengers instigate their fights. They seek out to do the best they can to defeat evil wherever it is, while the X-Men prefer to protect themselves and the rest of mutant kind from oppression, from oppression, depression, suppression, and any type of action that threatens their existence. That leaves the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four explore. Now, really, when you notice how their team is made up and what they do for a living, it's clear to see that they aren't necessarily the most action oriented in the Marvel trilogy. Their powers aren't even made to overpower anyone. The Thing is the weakest strongman in the entirety of the Marvel Comics. The Hulk and Colossus easily surpass him. The Invisible Woman's powers start killing her if she uses them too much. Johnny has the power, but his lack of discipline and determination prevents him from exploring his full potential. And lastly, there is Reed, who stated in many issues he's a scientist and not a warrior. All in all, the Fantastic Four are not a team made for fighting. They are a team that uses their powers more as tools, as opposed to using them for attack and defense. And this is where the movie comes in and reveals the future of comic book movies, especially when it pertains to comic book movies that don't revolve around finding a bad guy to punch. Primarily, those deep and insightful and meaningful comic books that prefer a route of self exploration as opposed to showing you as many blam boom pows as they can. The Fantastic Four between the whole Marvel Trinity are the most artistic of the three publications. They prefer to have the Fantastic Four traverse the entirety of Earth and space in several dimensions, all while asking very deep and philosophical questions about everything from why we're here, questioning the existence of God or gods, and where are we going. It's certainly a far cry from stopping the Skull from gaining access to the nuclear codes for the entire world, if you don't get my gist. That movie fucked that up big time. I mean, really, the first nail in the coffin should have been seen with the marketing. Knowing that the Fantastic Four are a much more deeper and more sci-fi type of novel, you would sit here and think they would go for more of a feel to let you know it's like Aliens or something more Star Wars or Star Trek like. But instead, they sat there and preferred to market it as an action movie. And I don't think that was a really good choice because people walked in expecting to see an action movie, and instead they got a sci-fi movie. You walked in for one thing and you didn't get what you came there to buy. And this showed in the script too because it started off trying to do its own thing, put the Fantastic Four in their own world. It really sat there and showed you the who the characters were, what they were doing, what they were going through. And then when it sat there and gave them their powers, it sat there and showed you how they were scared, how they were freaking out. They had powers they couldn't fully control. Their powers left them in pain. Like the Thing, throughout an entire year of having his powers, was literally hurting under that pile of rocks. And yet he sat there and decided to work for the military and do their dirty work nonetheless. This is a far cry from Spider-Man, who gets his powers and then 20 minutes later he becomes the hero of New York. He magically embraces them, not thinking of the fact that he can lift 10 tons. Like, what can he do in a sack? Like, he's probably killing people if he goes too hard or something. He can stick on walls. Definitely, he mastered that in 2.2 seconds. But the first part of the Fantastic Four sat there and showed you a different side of superheroes, which is the hard part of superheroes, which is the part where you feel like a freak, an outsider in society. Now, this is a far cry from many different hero movies, where hero movies sit there and treat powers and abilities and weapons and skills like they're nothing important, nothing flashy, that they can sit there and use them on whatever property they want to. The public sits there and just goes into total ignore mode when they see these things happen, and it's not realistic. But the Fantastic Four decided to take a more realistic approach to it. And to me, that was definitely the safer bet. But then the second nail in the coffin came in. And that is where they changed the tone of the story halfway through. Now, during the first half, you sit here, we got our origin put out, they got their powers, they're trying to master them, they're taking the steps they need to do to succeed. And then the second half happened where Reed finally got found after he ran away a year ago. Everybody was pissed off at him. Nobody liked him. He was nobody's friend. Then all of a sudden he comes back and he just becomes the automatic boss of the group. Everybody forgives him. He becomes best friends with Ben Grimm in 2.2 seconds. That's a load of shit, and that's not a realistic script, even though you were maintaining a realistic vibe throughout the entirety of it. And then they sit here, save the world, yeah. But then they're just going to make demands to the U.S. military that this is what we want and this is how we're going to do it, and if we don't, we're not going to work with you guys anymore. And it became a cliche piece of drivel. It became an early 2000s, that first decade 2000s of superhero movies where it was predictable and just shit. It was just horrible. And mind you, the entirety of the last half of the movie took place in fucking 2 days. 2 days. 1 year of you being missing. I mean, Ben Grimm has sat there and stacked up a body count damn near 50 strong in 2 days? Really? Now, the thing that scares me about this is what the future of comic book movies, particularly comic book movies that have more of a feel of the Fantastic Four, which is more deep and philosophical, and these are more of a sci-fi feel, these more of a fantasy feel, and they're not like X-Men, Iron Man, Avengers. They need to sit here and show a more artistic viewpoint of comics as opposed to the action-oriented viewpoint. But Hollywood doesn't want to do that. They're trying to make these summer blockbusters that take the predictable path and just shows men in tights doing the same thing over and over and over again. You get the girl, you save the world, yada yada yada. And that's not what we want to see from comic book movies coming up. Primarily because if we want to see more deep and philosophical comic books, such as The Sandman and Rising Stars, do we really want that same feel as Iron Man or the Avengers in those type of movies? Like, do they really need to hold the same amount of wit? And I don't think so. Comic books are deep and they can go many different directions than just one. Now, this is not to say that Wolverine or Captain America and the Avengers can't be deep and insightful, but those are the lucky titles who can make the choice as to whether to do so. To me, Iron Man can just as easily talk about his struggle between his humanity and his machine attachment to the Iron Man suit or he can just load his suit up with missiles and just go ham on everything. It really is his choice. But this dumbing down of American art to make the audiences happy just doesn't seem like a good direction that I want comic book movies to go. I really want to see them take a step in a direction that brings out the best of American art culture, because we do have something to offer. And we're more than just beer and football. We really can show the world something new. And that's what I believe.